A warm welcome here to the opening of the ARC, and it's our 40th Asian Racing Conference. And as we yesterday said, there's no better place to be for the 40th anniversary than here in Japan, and this time in Sapporo. When one looks at between the 39th and the 40th conference, we had only 18 months, but in this 18 months, a lot has happened. And it is amazing how we, as sport, has come through COVID. But now, what I would suggest, are real challenges come, because there's a significant change after COVID when you look at consumer behaviors, and if you look at the industry, and topics like social acceptability, social license come up more and more. When one looks at the ARF itself, we have excelled after coming out of COVID, but our challenges, we feel, are significant, and we feel strongly that if we want to manage these challenges, overcome these challenges, come up with new strategies, it is not one single jurisdiction who can do this, that we as a sport have worked much closer together, and that we really strive together to overcome them. So what I would suggest that we today in this session, first of all, that I lay out a little bit the footprint, what we want to cover, and that we leave sufficient discussion in the panel, how we in a way want to tackle this. When one looks at the industry, we start, especially because we're here in Sapporo, with the breeding industry. And it's interesting when we see what happened since the Melbourne conference. We see in the breeding industry, and starting with the host, Japan, that the fall crops have been pretty stable. And Japan has, in a lot of ways, really been exemplary, how in a way to grow it, and where we saw some significant reduction in other jurisdictions over a longer period of time, Japan had an extremely steady and positive development. When one looks now at the ARF other jurisdictions, we can see that we have a pretty steady development. So we see no health issues, which I think it's positive to note. But it is interesting to see that recent sales activities, when we later go into the sales figure, show some interesting development. Europe is a similar development. There is no major change after COVID. When one looks long term, one sees a significant decline in certain jurisdictions, and this is a trend that we are in relation producing of foals. We are not growing. The interesting part is when we look at the economics, and this is the sale prices. We start again with ARF countries, and we see, especially from 23 to 24, very positive developments in countries like South Africa, where you see an increase of 30%, which shows, after we have overcome, obviously, the significant cutting off of South Africa from the rest of the world, with the new import protocol, export protocol, there is a significant optimism has come back into the market, which is very positive to note. And we see in New Zealand some positive figures where you, again, with some new stimulus and investment in the industry, which is positive, while the rest of the market is pretty stable. From the average price, the median price shows a similar development, but there's one clear message when you really analyze it a little bit more deeper. The top end of the market, the top end is strong. The middle market gets soft, and there is very, very little demand in the bottom part. So it's a very clear prioritization and strong emphasis on the top market. Looking at prize money, which is key for the investment of the industry, and again, the pandemic prize money, post-pandemic prize money, saw significant increases back to a thriving wagering turnover during the pandemic. Because we went practically digitalized, where there were disposable income focus suddenly on wagering. So that has given us significant growth. For example, in Hong Kong, we had a windfall profit in wagering turnover of around 4 billion because the casino industry in Macau could not be reached our customers. And after COVID, you could see how this, in a way, disappeared. But I think this led, if you look at prize money growth, we see a very solid prize money growth in the whole industry. New Zealand, between 22 and 23, and South Africa, the prize money has gone up by 13 and 12% respectively. Hong Kong prize money has gone up by 11%. Australia experienced growth up to 10%. Japan had 6%. UAE and Korea saw 6 and 7%. So this is a positive development, obviously. Going back to Europe, you see significant smaller prize money increases. Great Britain and Ireland saw 1 and 2% growth. France experienced 4%, and the prize money in US was pretty stable. When you compare the prize money growth between Europe and the ARF, you can see there's a clear trend that Asia has grown significantly more. And I would advocate one of the reasons is because the funding model is a much more integrated funding model. You have a higher return from the wagering industry to the racing industry, and that enables this positive growth, which then reflects in sale prices and the whole economic value stream. When we look then at the wagering turnover, how the wagering turnover, which was very strong development during COVID and in the end phase of COVID, but what has happened for the wagering turnover afterwards? So the explosive growth was clear, could not be sustained, but it has, till now, been pretty resilient. I would say more till lately. Because what when I looked at the figure, could clearly see the betting turnover has started to soften, and has softened especially in the last 6 months, 9 months, even more profoundly. 22 to 23, Australia saw a decline of 10%. But putting it into perspective, there was a 39% growth before, but some of the windfall gains maybe we achieved were not any longer materializing. When we looked at Hong Kong, our turnover was down by 0.5%, and it was especially with the fall in local customers. Both Japan and New Zealand saw a 1% increase in turnover compared to 13% and 3%. Korea had a 1.6%. So that's probably give you a perspective. But when one looks at 2024, we see a significant decline in most racing jurisdictions. When one, in a way, sees, for example, Hong Kong, our turnover was down by 4.6%. The interesting part is our local turnover. The Hong Kong market fall sometimes to 9%. One of the reasons is our top end, those who are 20% of our customers who are responsible for around 40% of the turnover, felt the economic impact. But commingling, which grew up by 15%, have significantly in a way compensated it. Well, look at the Victorian Racing Carnival, it suffered a 12% decline. And when one looks at the UK, the overall turnover seems to trending down by 6%. The only major jurisdictions where you don't see at the moment a fall is Japan, which has, the global trend is clear, but Japan has really bucked the global trend. And it is an amazing achievement and shows extremely resilience. But how the overall market looks, what is the overall positioning of the gaming market? And one can clearly see our share in the sports betting, overall sports betting market is shrinking. in 2023, other sports have shown a strong growth. If you look at market share, our market share in 2022 was 66%, and it goes now to 69%. It's the other sports. Our market share is falling, and we have now only a market share of 31%. If you look at 2020, our market share was 43%. One other indicator which shows the interest in our sport is the race day attendance. So consumer behavior, and I would like to say this as long COVID, has changed dramatically. Everything in consumer behavior, but patterns of consumer were significantly disturbed, has changed. There is still a significant demand for major race meetings. But the average race meeting has a significant decline. Looking at the Japan Cup, and there is definitely factors like horses play a major role. But if you look at the Japan Cup 2019, we were at 80,000. And it has gone back, especially if you look at 2023, probably the equinox effect, it has gone to 85,000. But it has shown a very, very strong recovery. Melbourne Cup is a similar figure, 81 before, 84 later. Hong Kong international races, we had a bumper year in 2018. It is 2019 and 2021. You could see the COVID impact hit a little bit. And we are back to 73,000, which is a positive. The Everest went from 40,000 to 46,000, 45,000. And the Kentucky Derby, 150,000, and with the 150th anniversary, ended up with 160,000. So, looking now at average race meetings, and you can see the impact of change of customer behavior significantly on the average day-to-day race meeting. Overall attendance rate fall, especially for the average meeting, and looking at Hong Kong, for example, you can see on the graph that the Happy Wednesday was, before we were at 20,000, we are now at 14,000. Still a good figure. Obviously, somebody had a problem in the back. That it's hopefully not related to my presentation. If you look at charting, where we were at 30,000, where we are now approximately at 20,000, and Japan racecourse attendance is, has fallen a little bit too. But what is the reason? Customer behavior has changed fundamentally. And that sets a little bit the stage for what I would suggest are our major challenges we have to address. We are still in a state where we say we are not ill. Are we healthy? If you look at long-term sustainability, of commercial sustainability of the sport, I have some concern. And what I advocate, we have to analyze what our issues are. We have to look at strategies, how we want to overcome this. And I personally think we have huge opportunities, but we can unlock this opportunity only if we work together and collaborate together and execute the strategies. And not, while these meetings are very important to get aligned, to get change management, but we have to act on it. And we have to act fast, because our competition is growing every day. We had in Melbourne, we outlined 9 major industry challenges. And I don't want to go necessarily through these challenges one by one, but starting with industry, fragmentation, integrity, illegal operators, social acceptability, etc. But when we really step back and say what are the focus areas for the meeting here, therefore, one aspect is industry fragmentation. The second, we want to focus on is social acceptability. The third one is the growth of the illegal and offshore betting. And number 4 is the longer-term sustainability of our sport, which is at risk due to an aging customer base. So this is what I would like to focus on today. Industry fragmentation. You know this probably even better than me, because in Hong Kong we are in a relatively positive situation that we have a completely integrated model. But when one looks at the thoroughbred industry in more detail, if you look at the stakeholders, so how you align, we have the federation, which are not bodies who run differently to FIFA, who run the sport. So I think we try to get alignment. But if you look at racetrack operators, owners, wagering operators, racing charity bodies, aftercare providers, breeders, jockey guild, trainers association, race club racing authorities, to get an alignment of strategic objectives, to get plans how we overcome challenges, I would not call it mission impossible, but one has to be extremely determined to align, and in certain areas, you need structural changes. And I want to use some examples by countries. So Japan, Hong Kong are in a very comfortable position. But if one looks at racing in Australia, you have a very federated structure and funding model. So there is naturally competition between the different states. It's about fixtures, it's about the wagering dollar. And sometimes competition is good. But even if you look now at the wagering dollar, you have in Australia, even on products, not one pool. You have every state has a pool. So the issue is it comes to pari-mutuel betting, which is the key income source and generates a significantly higher revenue. If you don't have liquidity, if you split liquidity, naturally, customers, especially bigger customers, will go to fixed odds. The good thing is, and I'm positive that if we clearly see that we as an industry, we should not fight with each other, we should really focus and come together as an industry and fight our competition. And it's great that we have 2 key persons here from Australia, especially New South Wales and Victoria on stage, so that we can have this discussion. And I'm optimistic when one looks together at the future that we will find solutions. Great Britain is probably the most challenged when it comes to industry fragmentation. It is for our colleagues in the BHA, I would not call it mission impossible, but closely. And even Tom Cruise cannot help you, because you need alignment of interest. And it is crucial when you have a sport, which is probably one of the best racing products in the world in Great Britain. But if you look at the return to owners, it's poor. If you look at the return for racetracks to invest in the future, to invest in technology, there is not enough revenues coming back to the industry to address this. One concern of fragmentation is US. It was a major, major achievement to establish HISA, which is really the first federal body who ensures the integrity of the sport and have a very clear regulatory approach. When you look factually at the results, all those HISA managed tracks have a significant reduction in breakdown rates of horses. And when one looks at one key issue of the sport, is the breakdown rate of horses in a race. HISA has achieved this. There is massive improvement if it comes to medication control. But HISA is at risk to be derailed through the interest of certain fragmented industry participants who take this to court, and one has to see what the outcome is. But it is of great concern. It was a great achievement we celebrated in the last Asian Racing Conference, but it is now at risk. What I really would like to suggest is we have to resolve issues locally, and there are different priorities in the local industry, but we have to think globally, and especially when it comes to have necessary conditions to keep our social license. While I don't like the word social license, and social acceptability doesn't describe it completely, but there is definitely a challenge of how we as an industry are seen in a wider group of those people who are not in racing. What I would like to advocate is to find collaborative solution to racing's key challenges, and that we work together to resolve them. This is why I want to focus now on topic number 2, social acceptability. And I break it down to practically 4 aspects which we would like to discuss during the conference. One is animal and human welfare. Second, what I would call is ESG compliance. Thirdly, creating social and economic value to the wider community. And last not least, responsible gambling. First, animal and human welfare. We are, in some countries, at a very critical juncture. There are more extreme groups who attack the sport and challenge, should we have a social license? Should they be withdrawn to conduct racing? And the key focus, what I would advocate, which we as sport have to address and minimize, is a catastrophic breakdown of horses and, in a way, exercise-induced sudden death. And there are strategies how we can do this, but it needs a very clear focus how we do it. Science and technology are the cornerstone for improving equine safety. When one looks at the second part, that is requirements that the society expects from every organization now, is compliance, especially when it comes to environmental sustainability and to carbon footprint, and how we as an industry are seen to comply with 2050 carbon neutrality. Thirdly, we have to create social economic value, not only for us. And last not least, what we discussed before was the wagering turnover. Sorry, I was a little bit going back and forth. The aftercare of horses is the number 2. That is another issue. We have to look at the social acceptability. Third, and I would like to say that when it comes to this aspect, we have made significant progress. But coming back to catastrophic breakdown, because both are, in a way, a little bit linked. And when you look at the use of science, how much we have to invest to ensure that we use technology and science to really, in a way, come to the fore to do this. And it is absolutely vital that we invest in the use of science for the breakdown of horses and for the aftercare. When one looks at the high level of collaboration we need when it comes to breakdown of, reduce the number of breakdown of horses, we had the first IGFA Global Summit where we had 90 of the global leaders in the industry come together and exchange their views. And it's a clear message. We need much more research. We need much more investment to reduce the breakdown rate, and that we are able then to really responsibly say we have done the best what we can to be in a very good position. Yesterday, we had a very good workshop in IFRA, and the annual conference here, because aftercare is the other aspect which we discussed will be challenging. And when you see what the problem is, to identify what the solution are, it is one of our big challenges which will be attacked by the community if we don't address this. We have definitely our issue with our workforce. This is when you see that most people in this table work 6-7 weeks per day, which I think is not social responsible, and we see a significant reduction in workforce. The ESG compliance is definitely something which we as industry have so far not tackled holistically. We have the environmental and social responsibility as an industry to act on this. And what we suggest is that we be much more focused on how we address these issues. One aspect of climate change is to mitigate climate change is, for example, what we did in Hong Kong. We could see that we had races which were close to where we have a bubble index, which shows, heat bubble index, which shows this is not a safe zone where we can race horses. So we introduced then from July on meetings in the afternoon and start at 2, and the same happened with our friends in Japan. But fundamentally, as an industry, we have to be much more proactively going into the reduction of carbon footprints. And there are other sports who has made much more progress in relation to how they tackle this. We see in a way that, for example, if you look at sports, the UN has a UN Sports for Climate Action Framework, which I think was very helpful for other sports. And we prepare as industry a white paper of the IHFA, which will be, probably we'll have a discussion in October to how we want to address this. But one aspect I'm really concerned about is the change of public perception in relation to the sport. And that's why we have to, in a way, take care of the carbon footprint. But coming back now to the topic of create social and economic value for the wider society. We saw the close down of racing in Macau, and we will see the close down of racing in October in Singapore. The interesting thing is that Singapore had not a fundamental problem. They had still a positive revenue, but the government decided there is not enough value in it. We can use the land resources for something much more valuable, and there is not an economic social benefit which justify to allocate land resources to the Singapore Turf Club. When one looks at industries who are only racing and wagering, they are definitely much more under challenge than when you have an integrated industry where you have racing and breeding, which helps you to create really social economic benefits. Last not least, the topic of responsible gambling. Many people see our sport simply as gambling. And when you look at regulators, regulators are very concerned that gambling can create social challenges. And what happens then is the regulators don't look at the illegal market. They don't look at the offshore market. They over-regulate the legal market. It is either via taxation, via significant reduction in frameworks which allow operators to conduct their business. Great Britain will face now the significant issue of checks regarding affordability, for example. And what happens then? This over-regulation and over-taxation goes into the illegal market or to offshore operators. And this is one of our challenges, how we communicate with our regulators that we are not the ones who should be over-regulated and drive practically everything into the illegal market. And that leads into number 3, the growth of the illegal and offshore betting market. When one looks at how this market has grown after the pandemics, it is much higher growth factor than what we see in our regulated gaming. The illegal betting market is now as much as 1.7 trillion, 1.7 trillion US in turnover. It's growing significantly faster, and the compounded over-regulation of us has further encouraged this growth. And if one really looks at how this market has avoided AML policies, crypto gambling has been exploded using crypto to settling accounts. We have now illegal operators or offshore operators as plug-in software. You can, in a way, can set up a sports book with licenses in certain countries within 24 hours. If you pay a little bit more, if not, it costs you it will be 48 hours. You have the software available, everything to what you can do to conduct illegal gambling. And this is a major problem for us, that the revenues go offshore. I had a discussion with our friends from Australia who feel that the offshore market will grow even further, so that the industry is deprived from significant income. We as AIF has seen this as a major issue, and that's why we have tackled this issue with our AIF Council, which has done tremendous work and has got extremely good reputation. We, as a racing industry, have been seen as a leader to tackle the illegal market with research, with strong contacts we have developed globally, including the UN, and I think that we are seen as a true global leader to address this problem. But we have to get this message across much more to our regulators, that we have a framework under which we can operate. Now, let me come to the last topic, which is the long-term sustainability is at risk due to our aging customer base. If you recap again, our aging customer base, we have 43% of our customers in racing in general are 55 plus. And when one looks at the betting turnover, it's 52% of our betting turnover comes from a customer group which is 55 plus. We had a discussion about this in the last ARC, which was interesting. We looked at new technologies, Web3, etc. But it is still a discussion we have not structured enough addressed. And that's why we want to make it one key focus for today. What I would advocate, first of all, that we have to position racing as a sport with appreciation and love for horses. This is a basic and basis for how we want to promote the sport and how we want to develop the sport. Japan is probably the best example how this has been done, how, in a way, you have a relatively healthy customer base, how Japanese racing fans love the sport, and how they see the jockeys as sporting heroes. For me, one of the most touching experiences was when Romantic Warrior won the Yasuda Kinen. If you would have in any other sport that an overseas team wins a local competition, in Japan, the racing fans were enthusiastic about Romantic Warrior coming back to the scales, and they saw a real sporting hero. This is a culture which Japan has cultivated, and I would advocate that we have such a positioning too in other jurisdictions. And I personally think when you look at positioning racing as a sport, it will enable us to unlock new growth markets. The development in the Gulf region is a classical example how the sport has been exploded. And I only can compliment when one looks at the UAE and in Saudi Arabia, how the Gulf region has developed. And especially one example from Saudi Arabia, the number of races has more than doubled since 2020. The number of starters has increased by 223%. So while we say Macau and Singapore is not any longer there, it's far compensated by growth in this area. The Saudi World Cup, as we all know, is a prize money, the whole meeting of 37 billion. But I think it is shown when the positioning is a sport, we can grow. And we see the same in other Gulf countries like Oman and Bahrain, who have significant growth. Now comes to another growth market. And it's key, if this growth market would be developed, is China. There is the National Equine Industry Development Plan, which was 2020 to 2005, who specifically said China would like to build an equine industry. It is equestrian sport and it's horse racing. The number of riding schools in China have grown from 1,000 riding schools within 5 years to 5,000. So prediction is that in 3 years you will have 10,000. If one sees the horse racing side, it's still in this infancy. But one of the biggest owners globally now in the world is the mainland Chinese. So there is obviously a huge potential, but there is necessary to have best practices. And we, as Hong Kong Jockey Club, will have start regular races in mainland China in 2026 with a major development of a grandstand, which is based in our current training center, which will show regular races. Second, which we advocate, we have to promote horse racing as with live events and entertainment to attract younger customers. Our market research shows if you only try to promote the sport and not the entertainment element, you're not effective. There is, especially with Gen Z, a much lower willingness to look at sports events. And especially if you don't combine them with live sports, with entertainment, we see some good examples. We are successful with in Hong Kong with Happy Wednesday. We see, in a way, the Melbourne Cup has always been an anchor. We see definitely with the Everest that you have a completely different crowd and much younger crowd. We have the Breeders' Cup, which has this example. So we see elements, but we have to, in a way, dial this up significantly. Thirdly, we have to become data-centric to become customer-centric. We have to, if you want to create a much more holistic customer experience, when you look at what happens in really industry you grow, their key focus is data centricity, to understand the customers, to understand the value you can unlock. And this is in a fragmented industry, significantly challenges. I had an interesting discussion with the NBA, their commissioner, and asked him, why are you going to gambling? He said, the reason why I go into gambling is the customer is much more engaged, the customer interacts with us 30% more, and it gives me much more holistic data of his behavior so that we, in a way, can create much better offering. If we do this, and if we have really interesting presentations of the sport with performance data, this is a key aspect which other sports do to create this kind of stickiness. Then we come to build, number 4, build a global product to enable us to build a global customer base. We have made some progress in promoting our top races, our top horses, our top jockeys with long genes, which I think is a good start. But when you look at the mega events we have, we don't connect them. We have wonderful sporting events, but can we create a marketing, branding platform on top of these events to really create a much more global audience and to position horse racing as a global sport? There are discussions about racing series, which we had multiple times before, but a starting point is to create really global racing events we can leverage. And one of the leverage points is a world pool. We started with a world pool with Esket and how you can leverage a world-class product and combine it with a global audience. And I would advocate this is one of the biggest success we had in the last years. We have expanded the world pool now into multiple other countries, from Great Britain as a starting point to the UAE, South Africa, Ireland, Australia, Saudi, Germany, and Argentina. We create now more multiple race cards, which is not only from one jurisdiction. And I think we should take some pride that we combined races from New South Wales and Victoria and created then in Australia the first Australian pool, which I think, again, brought significant liquidity. And I can only say this is definitely an opportunity for us to create additional revenue. We went from 34 race meetings in 2024. We have now 48. And if you look at the figures, we grow from 139 million US dollars to nearly 1.2 billion US dollars. And I firmly believe we have significant more potential. So this potential is we have to create a new protocol to be innovative and really use technology to create exotic pools, to get global pools. So this is a classical example where I strongly feel that we have significant opportunity to grow our business and that we use the positive income we have from these fields to fund other activities if it comes now to animal welfare and breakdown rates, if it comes to what we did with South Africa to address the South African horse sickness restrictions that horses could be exported. And in this respect, I would advocate that this is a unique opportunity. We will explore all these challenges in a much more holistic way. But in closing, I strongly feel we have to embrace change. We have to make much quicker progress, and the focus should be us, first of all, how we can embrace change and collaborate more, how we overcome fragmentation of the industry, how we have a joint approach to address animal welfare issues, especially breakdown rate of horses and the sudden death phenomena, how we work together to become more, as a sport, social acceptable, and last not least, how we address the key topic of our aging customer base to be customer-centric and to be data-centric. In this respect, I would like to thank you for your attention. I try to keep in time so that we have enough discussion. So what I wanted to do is really to set the stage, and I hope this provides us with a platform to discuss this much more in the sessions we have now with the panel members, as well as in all the aspects we will cover later. Thank you.